foundation.
And I know some of those houses.
She's probably, if you're we'll have to talk about that, because I did a real deep dive on the candidates. No, I wasn't. It's like someone is not making.
Good evening and welcome. I just want to give you a few informational items. This meeting is being recorded right now as I speak. So if you don't want anything said, you can pick up on microphone. So just giving you a heads up. I need to have you all sign in for contact tracing purposes if you haven't done so. Also, the reason this meeting is being recorded is so it can be posted to our website and translated for Spanish, for Spanish speakers. So that will be happening. My name is Steve Herrington. I am the County Superintendent of Schools for till December 31st, actually January 3rd, but who's counting? Anyway, and that completes 51 years. Actually, January will be 52 years of education. And I've enjoyed every minute of it. I like to come to school, and I enjoy working with kids and teachers, and I hope I made a positive difference in our community. I've served 12 years as county superintendent and 39 years as superintendent in total of those 51 years. So I've been around a while. But it's a good job. I enjoyed it, and I'm going to have a hard time letting go, as everyone knows. But anyway, I want to welcome you because I think being a school board member is one of the most essential parts of our democracy. I'm a history teacher, government teacher, and I think being a school board member is the base root of our American democracy. You need to know, if you choose to run for school board, that you individually have no authority. The only time you have authority is when you sit collectively as a school board. And so you're a parent and a community member, but you are not a board member Monday through Friday until you're at the board meeting. So keep that in mind. School board members set policy and direction for the school district. They hire and fire the one person that they have direct authority over, is the superintendent. They don't have direct authority over teachers because they don't have the authority to license and evaluate teachers. You have to have a license for that. It's called administrative service credential. So if you're running for the school board because you're unhappy with teacher X, Y, and Z, you need to know that that wouldn't be within your realm of supervision or provision. But you would work with the superintendent who has that authority. So I hope you're running for the right reasons and for the purposes to make a difference in your community. So we're going to go through some of the requirements to be a school board member, and then I'm going to turn it over to this illustrious panel. And this illustrious panel represents a spectrum of experience. That's what we put together. Someone in their first term, someone in their multiple terms, and we'll put it at that. But they'll go through and share their experiences. We have different types of school boards. We have a county board of education, which is an appellate board. When people are unhappy with the local school board on certain decisions, they can appeal. They don't appeal to the county superintendent. That's not within my jurisdiction. They appeal to the county board. And Herman will tell you a little bit about that because he's a county board member. So let's see if I can get this going. My staff kept saying, you have everything you need. I think I do. Let's see if I can move this thing. Hey, look how good I am. Okay. First of all, the panel, I'm going to let Herman, why don't you introduce our panel members, and we're just for the purpose of introductions.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have, first of all, good afternoon. My name is Herman G. Hernandez. I am the Area 5 trustee for the County Board of Education. This is my 8th year having the pleasure and honor of serving our community. And I think we're going to go down the line, and if you can each introduce yourself and let us know what term you're in and what district you're representing, that would be awesome. And this is for you. We'll see.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rocio Mondragon Reyes, and I'm in my first term at the Rosewood School District.
I'm Joanna Pond, and this is my first term with Petaluma City Schools.
And current president.
Oh, you could, yeah, you guys have
You need to push the button up on that, so.
Yes. My name is Yvonne Crack. I am currently serving on the Alexander Valley School Board. I've been a board member on combined Alexander Valley and Healdsburg High School when Healdsburg had just a high school board for a total of about 27 years. So I've been doing this a while.
All right, and we'll do our panel after Dr. Herrington goes over all the exciting forms and things you have to do before you even start your campaign.
They'll be exciting. I'll make them as exciting as I can. So we don't see him. All right. The registrar of voters is the primary, you'll be dealing with the registrar of voters in Sonoma County. Kamari Marchbanks is probably the person you're dealing the most with. You'll get a copy of these slides if you signed in. There'll be slides, so don't worry about that. They'll go out tomorrow. But I just wanted you to know who you'd be dealing with. They're all election specialists. One deals with questions as it relates to campaign financing. One has a specialty in candidate filing, and one is the election supervisor. So basically, if the other two can't answer it, Kamari usually can answer it. He's been around for a while.
Kamari is amazing, use him as a resource. He is like an open book and he gives you his cell phone and he will respond immediately.
So he'll help you with your paperwork if you get stuck somewhere in the process. To submit documents to review, you can do it online, and these addresses are given to you. If you have questions on finance, that's given to you there. Yeah, they give you their phone number directly, or you can mail, or you can visit. I personally like to walk in and talk to a person, so I still do that. And so I go down to Fiscal Drive down there at the Government Center, and we go over that. The website is on the website there, and so those are the things you need. This is a primary contact piece of information you need to have. You need to know that next week, I think Monday is July the 18th, the nomination period now opens for candidates for school board. And the nomination deadline closes August the 12th. If an incumbent chooses not to run, for example, I chose not to run, then they extend the deadline by an additional week. So you could have a school board. I know of one school board that has all 5 seats on it. That's unusual, very unusual. And that's because they had multiple resignations during the COVID period. And so those seats have to be either reaffirmed for 2 years or reaffirmed for the 4-year term. So it depends which seat. So when you go in and you're looking at a particular district and you don't know if you can make a full commitment of 4 years, it may have a 2-year seat open. You might want to pick that seat. Then after 2 years, you can choose to run for that seat again, but it will be for the full 4-year term. So most school board seats are for 4-year terms, unless you're filling a vacancy. And we'll talk about how that process works within a district. Districts will interview, they will appoint, they fail to appoint, and I can appoint. But most districts meet their responsibility and they appoint their school board members. In fact, I've even appointed Herman when a school board doesn't have its quorum. And a school board has to approve its budget. So Herman went on up to Kashaya. If you don't know where Kashaya is, it's a drive. It's 2.5 hours away from here, and it's one of our school districts. And as a county board member, he sat on that board so they can get their budget approved. If they only have a 3-person board, and when you only have 2 people there, you don't have a quorum. Quorum is the majority of the board needs to be present to make action. So there are some exceptions, but we really want you to run for school board seats that you feel most comfortable in, and that you may not know this yet, but the vote by mail goes on October the 10th, and November the 8th is the election day. But what I would tell you also is that when you go in, some of our districts are by trustee areas now. Is West Sonoma County under trustee areas now? Thank you. Because they start this year. Petaluma is in trustee areas. Sonoma Valley is in trustee areas. Santa Rosa City is in trustee areas. I don't know, and more of that's going to happen. Mostly your districts of over 2,000 to 3,000 will have trustee areas. So find out where you live, because where you live, if it's not an at-large district, it's a trustee area, and you may not live in the right trustee area. So you need to check that out when you go in for your paperwork. They say trustee area 3, you're not sure what trustee area 3 is, you might look at your local district, school district map to find out where trustee area 3 is. The county board is divided up into 5 trustee areas. Coincidentally, they correspond to the supervisorial districts. So that's an easy one for them to follow. So decide before you're going into whether or not you're going to file a statement of qualifications. This is a 200-word statement you will need to file, telling people what qualifies you for the school district. And each district charges differently for this. In some districts, they pay for the qualification statement, and in some districts, they say the candidate must pay for the qualification statement. So you need to ask the question, who pays for this statement? So if you pay for the statement, then you have another choice. You can have the statement done in English, and then if you choose to have it done in Spanish as well, it costs you additional funds. So just keep that in mind. It does cost to run for the school board. It is not a free job, so you have to file some filing fees. This is the qualification statement. That's separate from the filing fee. So keep that in mind. If you're running just within your local district, it's not as bad as running countywide. I can tell you that. Because I file a countywide filing fee. So after you file your statement of qualifications, that's determined by your local district and how they've set it up. You'll either write a check not to exceed a certain amount, and they'll hold the check. And if, because I've done this, I've written a check, no one's filed against me, I pull the check. Okay? You have to do that within 24 hours. They won't hold it much longer. But anyway, that happens. So you need to keep that in mind, depending on what the cost is to you. If someone files against, I was with you, then you want to keep that on file. Your statement will get printed, and their statement will get printed. So when you get your ballot book, it will have the qualification statement in there. Everything goes into the registrar of voters. Candidates folder is your basic information. So what you picked up tonight is the candidates folder. And it has the basic information that you need. So if you look at it, you decide if you're going to go for a full term or a short term. And how would that be determined? Depends if you're filling a seat for someone who's only been appointed, and maybe only the remaining portion of that term. The district that you're running for, just out of curiosity, I'm going to start all the way down here. How many of you are running in Petaluma, WA School District? Anybody from WA? There are 40 school districts in this county. Something. You're running for WA? Hey, okay. So we have somebody from South County running for a school board. Anybody North County? Let's see, Cloverdale. Okay, Cloverdale. Then we go all the way to, let's go West County, Monterey. Hey, very so work it each side. I watch it. I'll go East County, Sonoma Valley. Unified. Okay. All right, so that just gives you an example of who's in this community, what districts are up for seats. All 40 school districts are up for seats, if you didn't know that. So you can look at where you live and look at what they're doing. Fill out the candidates folder, which is your basic information. The ballot designation worksheet, the words to describe your primary occupation. Mine, and I listed as county superintendent of schools. You only get the 3 words. County superintendent of doesn't count. Schools counts. As I always say, the big words count. You get 3 big words to describe you. So think which ones you want. And then we go to the statement of economic interest. And you need to fill out a statement on how much money you think you're going to spend on your campaign. If you're going to spend $500 for flyers and posters, that's good. You need to pick one of the funding categories in there. And then, of course, you have to file a statement 700. That's your economic interest. The state of California wants to know your economic interest. How much do you have invested? Most of us don't have anything invested because we just own our homes or our rent or we do that. Usually you don't have to, but you have to fill out the form. That's a requirement. If you're a current school board member and you're going off the board, you fill out the form. If you're a new school board member running for election, you fill out the form. And then once you take your oath of office, guess what? You have to fill out the same form again. It's the state of California, folks. We have you fill out multiple forms. The same form 3 times. Leaving, coming, and then when you get elected. So that's the same form. The declaration of candidacy. All the information in there is about the oath. Let's talk about the oath. Because many people oftentimes think that, well, I don't want them to, let's say, I'll pick a good one. State of California may require vaccinations. They're not going to require it until 2023, but they may require it. You need to know that you take an oath, and that oath says that you will uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of California. That means all of its laws and requirements. So if the state of California makes a law, you don't have the opt-out provision. You are a member of an elected body who has to enforce the rules of the state of California. Now, how that policy is carried out is a reflection of the local district. An example might be, I will use an example that went all the way to court in Sonoma County. We had a little district, and when we had the COVID exposure, the students went out to recess. You might know it well, it's down in your area. So the students went out to play, and Herman came down with COVID. Well, the first thing is, students who had an exposure of 15 or more minutes had to be restricted for 10 days. That was the first set of rules. Well, you know kids, they play at recess. They touched everybody and talked to everybody. So that whole grade level went out to recess. So in Alexander Valley, if your whole grade level went out to recess and they talked to everybody and they all have to stay home for 10 days, what happens the next day in 2nd grade? There is no 2nd grade. They're all, because they all talk to each other and they all socialize. So the local school board said, well, if we have to follow that rule, what we'll do is we'll make our kids wear masks at recess. That way they've been a protected environment. And the law says if you had a mask, because you didn't have to wear a mask at recess, but if you had a mask, then you were protected and you could come to school the next day. Somebody didn't think that was the right rule to follow. So they sued the school board. Get used to it. I've been sued. I don't want to tell you how many times I've been sued. Because I'm the head of the district or I'm head of the county, I get sued. I have insurance. You as school board members have insurance. Your district has insurance. It's as long as you follow the rules of your district, you're covered. If you go rogue, you may not be covered. But the board had made a decision at an open public board meeting to make masks mandatory at recess. They went to person tried to get an injunction. Judge said, the health and welfare of the children are more important than your personal lawsuit. So no, I will not impose an injunction. Then I went to court. When I went to court, the individual lost the lawsuit because the board was looking out for the best interest of all the students, and it had a mandate by the state that you were to keep your schools open. That most of those people who were on a board know that that was a requirement. So that's an example of how a board has to work in, you could have been the no vote, but if the majority went for it, you're part of a board, you're part of a team. So yes, you weren't the receiver. Ball wasn't thrown to you, it was thrown to her, but you're still part of that team. You have to work collectively together to make the community better and safer. Oftentimes, boards have open discussions. I don't agree with that. That's fine. You need to have some good ground rules and respect for each other when you're on a board. So look at all these filing forms that you get to fill out. Look at the brochure. Those of you that came in late, if you didn't sign in, please sign in. You'll get all this material sent to you electronically as well. But please look at it and complete it if you're going to truly run for the board. I think we gave you all the forms. All right, before we go to the panelists, general questions are just about the operational things you have to do. Yes.
Do you know roughly how long this whole process, like as a new person, like when you start to interact with the guy you said was awesome
Yes.
at the registrars, like what is it?
You have a whole month that it's open. You could go in on day one. I used to always go in day one, get my name on the list to make people know I'm running again. Not this year, but I'm running again. So I would put it on the board, and I take my paperwork home. And I would take it back, and of course I had to have multiple, I had my petition requirement. Everybody has a petition requirement. And it's a percentage of the voters in your district that you need to get signatures. It shows there's enough interest in your candidacy that it's worthwhile. And I think most of them were. Mine were
It's not an overwhelming number, it's like
25 to 40,
30,
depending on the size. I'm just countywide, so I had to have a larger number. But if you're running within Petaluma, what's your trustee area? Push it up.
I don't know my district number because we just went, and so when I first ran, it was at large. I think it was like 20 to 25, like Herman's saying. But if you're asking
signatures.
Just say they have to be registered voters, they have to live in the district.
So if I'm in a much smaller district.
Right, if hers was at large, she doesn't have to get those Petaluma wide. Now she's in trustee area 3. This is a good question to ask the people in the election. Do those 25 voters have to be can they be in the district, or do those 25 voters have to be in your trustee area? I don't know that answer. Say never run. So you need to ask that question. So if you need 25 voters, and maybe it's a trustee area, you only need 10. So, and they'll say it's within that trustee area. Then you have to get your neighbors, they're talking to you, signing.
So there's a bit of time, and so you go in and you say, okay, I want to run.
They give you the packet, which I've sort of given you right here. You'll say, well, I have that. And then you can start turning your things in. You don't have to turn them all in at once. I turned mine in piecemeal as I completed them. So you'll ask them. Any other questions about the process about running for the school board? I think you all got it. Yeah, good. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Herman.
All right, I got my mic here. All right, thank you, Dr. Herrington. So we did have some latecomers. I don't know if you grabbed that packet that Dr. Herrington was referring to, but it's definitely helpful, and you can use that as a guide. And just to specifically answer your question, Miss, you have till August 12th to turn in all the information once it opens on July 18th. It's like one full month. So if you could click forward, I don't know if you've seen the questions yet. They're pretty basic questions, but what I like to do sometimes when we're doing panel presentations and it's a little more informal and more, it's informative and informal, is open it up to you to see if you might have some very specific questions that you're like, I have to ask this right now. That I welcome that question now, and if not, we'll we have a series of questions here that will lead the conversation. So I am going to start. I
want to answer her question because, like Herman said, you have almost a month, but just turn it in as soon as possible. Because I had to go back twice because like when the city clerk looked at my information, she's like, "You forgot that," and so I had to go back. And she's like, "Oh, you didn't do this," because I had no idea. I mean, who knows what to do the first time you run? So just give yourself time. Yeah.
We're going to get more into that hopefully when we're answering the questions. But the other thing too for when you're applying is make sure you have a treasurer that's not your husband, your wife, your kid, you're somebody outside of the household.
Somebody who can figure out the forms.
Yeah, because there's the FPPC requirements for, which will go into that as well. Basically, you have to report and track every donation that your campaign receives. It's $99 or more. And Kamari and his team at the county go through that with you if you have any questions. But I think we should start at the very, very beginning. We have, like Dr. Herrington said, a pretty good spectrum of school board representation up here. And I'm on the county board, which is way different and constantly gets confused with authority over school districts. We do not have authority over school districts. The main difference between the County Board of Education, which I don't know, is there anybody in here that's planning on running in the 2022 election for county? So just plain and simple, the difference between a county board is Dr. Herrington is elected and we are also elected. The districts that are represented up here, they are elected, but the superintendent is fired by the district. We also don't oversee all 40 school districts. We oversee a very tiny population of students, our alternative high schools and our core community schools. Dr. Herrington made a quick reference of the appellate body that the role that we play in appeals and expulsion appeals and interdistrict transfer appeals. So if a student is denied an interdistrict transfer, they have the right to appeal it to their local district. And then they have, if they deny it, they have the right to appeal it to the County Board of Education. So we hear those a lot depending on the year and the season. But what I want to do is start at the very beginning, and I'm going to open it up to any one of you, whoever wants to answer these questions first. But how do you even start a campaign? Like, what would you recommend being the first thing you would recommend to this audience on campaigning? Because that is really essentially the first step before you are able to serve your district. So I want to answer that question.
I'll answer that question. Talk to your family. Because it's just not you that's going to be in the public eye.
Yeah, I think first of all, you have to decide why you want to run, what your motives are. And then, and as Dr. Herrington says, talk to your family and I come from a little tiny district. And so we don't have a lot of controversy and there's not a lot of difficulty, but you're still, every family member is still kind of visible. So, and then decide how you're going to approach your campaign and how much you need to get out there. I mean, in a little district like mine, I also had the advantage of, I had grown up in the district, so I knew everybody and everybody knew me. And so, you know, I wasn't campaigning in the more formal sense. When I was running for the Healdsburg High School Board, I did. I literally walked up and down the streets and knocked on doors and said, hi, and this is who I am, this is why I'm running, you know, give them a handout so they can remember your name later. And, you know, it's part of the process.
I have a follow-up question for tiny district. If you're running uncontested, do people typically campaign in that?
No, I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would recommend for you would be, and I don't know what district you're running for, but if you do start campaigning and promoting yourself, you might stay uncontested. The best elections you want to be in are the ones where you don't have an opponent, because you're going to win 100% of the time. That's not Wayne Gretzky. But I think like right now, you do have the opportunity to start talking to parents, talking to your community, talking to your grocery store.
Or informally.
Exactly, letting them know you're running. And then when you start to gain that momentum, and sometimes people run at the last second because they don't know anybody else is running. And actually, and for our members, I love the time, like if the small districts want us to be more focused on you, just let us know. I grew up in Herrington, so I know a little bit about small town vibes, but we do have 2 districts here represented who are a little bit larger, Petaluma being the largest one, as well as first term school board members. And President Pond, she's been the president since last year, you're doing a 2-year term. She's in her first term as well as being president, which is a very difficult task. So that's pretty awesome to know that you're president and your district is the largest up here. So and you do have district elections, which I think some of you are gonna have to run, but what was it like when you ran in 2018 for an at-large district? You had to campaign the whole city, I imagine.
Yeah, it was 7 of us running for 3 seats. And I got in probably too late. I want to say the first time I turned my papers in, it was maybe 2 weeks before the end of the filing period. But I'd say if I had it to do over again, I would have decided earlier. I would have gotten all my people together. One of my best friends is a graphic designer, so she designed my posters, and then someone else came along later and she was like, you don't know what you're doing, so I'm gonna be your campaign manager. I was like, thank you, because I had no clue what I was doing, as you can tell. I was just like, I'm just gonna run, and I had some posters and yard signs, but then this person who decided to help me, she helped me print up 10,000 door knockers. And I think we passed out like 8,000 of them. So I had my family, my friends go door to door. We knocked on a lot of doors. We left a lot of flyers, but it's a lot of work.
Do you remember about how much money you had to raise for your campaign?
I blocked so much of it out because it was just really stressful. I think I raised close to 5,000 and I spent 3,500-ish or so. Yeah.
No, that's great. And I also want to get Rocio involved in the conversation. She's one of our youngest school board members in Sonoma County currently. She was appointed last year in March for the Roseland School District, and reading a lot of amazing information about her appointment in the Press Democrat, I think it would be great to kind of understand, Rocio, like what were some of the things that inspired you to run for that appointment or apply for that appointment, and how could the community here get better prepared with their messaging as they run their own campaigns?
Well, I'm an alumna of the Roseland School District, and I graduated in 2015. I think, honestly, I was on the East Coast when COVID hit, and so COVID kind of brought me back to my community, and at the time, just along with a lot of other schools, I think across the country, I think there's been a lot of different conversations going around about equity and anti-racism and how that plays out in school districts. So when the vacancy opened, that's where my desire to be a part of the school board came from. I think that one of the things I've definitely learned from being a school board member is that there's a lot of value in the personal experience that you might bring as an alum or as a parent or whatever you might be in relation to the school district. But there's also the need to not solely center your mission on that, and then use that as like not in sight of that and the reason why you decided to run or interview, but also become more current and up to date with where things are at now. And I think that's where the conversing with community members really comes into play.
What was the first thing you did once you were appointed? Because there's the whole campaign part, but then there's like the huge steep learning curve.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is the Brown Act. So you might have already heard of it if you're trying to run. I think for myself, what really helped me was doing CSBA's Masters in Governance course once I was in as a board member, and I did all 5 of those courses, and that really helped me. I think fill in a lot of my gaps, especially compared to the more seasoned board members on my board.
How about you, and Joanne or Yvonne, when you first joined the board, like what were things that you went straight to? You're like, oh no, I got elected. What do I have to do now?
Well, I think for me, the most, I didn't do the CSBA classes until later. And I haven't done it the whole 5, I haven't done the whole program. So, I mean, I think that's a great idea. But for me, the most difficult thing was learning to read a school budget. We are, we have a business, and I thought I knew how to read a budget. Let me tell you, it's a whole new ballgame. So for me, that was the steepest learning curve.
Yeah, definitely the budget. And all the acronyms. I mean, I worked in schools in there. I mean, I thought I knew all the acronyms and I did not. Yeah, just getting used to how the meetings are run, when to vote, when to speak, when to allow the public to speak, just all of those things. It was a steep learning curve. I felt like I spent the first couple meetings just like sitting back and watching, unsure of what to say and when to say it.
Would you encourage any of the people in the room to be attending? I'm assuming most of you are already attending the board meetings that you're anticipating running for, but that's another really excellent way of kind of getting to see the board packet online now, but also listening to how the board interacts with each other and the community members. One of the things going back to campaigning, we talked a little bit about what some of our members did in their early stages to prepare for a campaign, but raising money, I think, how comfortable were you when you've campaigned in the past, any one of our members here, with asking people for money, and how did you come up with who you were going to ask? It seems to always be a key variable in campaigning.
Again, I have a lot of help from people. A friend of mine set up a website and she set up the donation link. So people just started donating, and then there were a couple of house parties, people donated. And again, thank goodness I have friends who are very political and active in campaigns all around the county. So they're like, okay, make sure when someone fills out a check, you also have them fill out this form with their occupation and their name and their address and all of those things. I had no idea. But it's not easy asking for money. I mean, if you get people behind you, I think people know that you're open to donations, then it can be a double-edged sword. Because it could be like 2 years down the line, I donated to your campaign. Like, I can't believe you're gonna do what I want. Or I went door to door for you, or I voted for you. I can't believe you're not doing this thing that I want. So yeah.
You have a question there?
Yes.
How big were endorsements from larger organizations for all of you in your campaign? So like political party endorsements, anything like that you guys all kind of helped, they donated to campaigns, was that part of like your fundraising as well?
Yeah, so I kind of want to pitch in on this because I've worked multiple campaigns and I've ran for my position 3 times, and I highly encourage you, even if you're running unopposed, to try and go through that entire process, because even if you run unopposed, you building the relationship with some of these larger organizations. There's a lot of different political action committees, from local chambers to labor, environmental unions, Democratic, Republican, all of those exist. They all have endorsement processes. But I highly encourage all of you to look at where your values stand and who you would want to support you, and reach out to them because they all have endorsement process, and some organizations may not have school board process, but they'll create one for you where they come up with questions. I've seen that happen in the past. And that also helps you with your, what I would call, one of the recommendations I would make to my own question of raising money is creating a money tree, starting very conservatively with what's your grandma gonna give you, what's your grandpa, parents, your neighbors, your brother, your sister, and then creating a long tree of $100 and seeing how much money that will help you raise, but then you incorporate the organizations who do endorsements, and some of those endorsements come with some extra funds. Yes, ma'am.
Were any of you involved in?
Hi, were any of you involved in candidate forums? It may not apply to the smaller districts, especially in uncontested elections, but are there any candidate forums that might come about before the election that would involve, like you mentioned, there were 7 candidates for the seats. Do you, any advice about candidate forums?
Definitely go to them. I mean, the first one, because I am I'm actually very introverted, and so I was terrified before the first forum. But then in the end, it turned out to be one of my favorite things was going out, talking about issues, talking about why I wanted to run. And so then when I was going door to door and dragging all of my kids, I had 4 kids, and they hated the election because they took me out walking up and down the hills of Petaluma, but we'd be knocking on doors and people would be like, oh, I already voted for you. And so I always ask them why. Well, why did you vote for me? And they're like, oh, I saw you at the forum. So either they attended in person or they watched it online. So.
Any other questions?
Any of you have a website? You set up a website?
I did when I ran the first time. Very helpful. The other thing too, because you are coming up with the deadline in August, is I would highly encourage you to really get, if you're running a contested race, even beforehand, I've seen school board members do what they call a campaign kickoff, which will sometimes make other members who might be thinking, they're like, oh, she's very well supported, or I like her message, I don't need to run anymore. But the point of a campaign kickoff is to really build that momentum, announce you're running, make that big splash. Social media really makes it. The only reason you would need a website, in my opinion, board now is just to get donations in through the internet, because social media won't allow you to take donations without a website. But with Facebook alone, it's an easy way to create your own website without having to create a website. And you promote yourself, you create your events for your campaign kickoff, and then like Joanne said, when you're needing volunteers, you create volunteer walks, you create phone banking, and it's all on social media. It's a very useful tool for campaigning and getting your name out there. And the other thing is campaigns can get expensive, especially if you're in a contested race, where you will want to try to send mailers out to voters. That's very expensive, but the best bang for your buck is honestly social media, especially because of the pandemic. Right now, one of the silver linings is everyone is glued to their social media, and they do get these ads that pop up, and you can make those targeted to just your district or to an entire area that you're running for. Any challenges that you experienced along your campaigns or being a school board member that would be something we would want to share with our candidates?
I follow up about the endorsements.
Absolutely.
So sometimes the endorsements do come with money. Like if a group endorses you, they'll also offer you money, but a lot of them are just, hey, you're endorsed for free. But that also does have a really big impact. Like if there's a group like, oh, this group endorsed Joanna. All of them do have a set of interview questions or maybe a video that you'll have to submit. But I'd say again, like Herman was saying, if they're aligned with your values, definitely go for those endorsements.
Challenges. What have been some of the biggest challenges, either campaigning or serving as a school board member? Not everyone speak at once.
I mean, as far as serving as a board member, I can't say, but as far as issues that I've run into as a board member, for me, it's mainly financial issues for the district and how we're gonna solve this monetary problem or that monetary problem. I think if you listen to what the other board members have to say and, try to use logic and common sense. And I've always strongly believed that you're there as a board member, you are really there for one purpose and only one purpose, and that is to provide the best education you can for the children in your district. To me, as a school board member, it should not be a stepping stone for a political reason. You should be there for the kids. You don't agree with the rest of the board all the time. But I think when you work together and you all kind of have the same goal, it's a positive experience.
I have a question about, how much do you lean, especially for the first timers, like how much do you lean on other board members to guide you? And what are the rules around conversations with board members that aren't public, and how often is that kind of interaction?
I don't know if I would say that I necessarily have leaned on other board members. I definitely have at the very beginning, especially the superintendent, leaned on them to guide me through those rules, and that being that outside of the board meeting, you can't start a serial meeting, and that happens if more than two people discuss the same topic, even if you play the telephone game with one person tells the other, that in itself is a serial meeting. So definitely being very cautious around those. I think that one of the challenges coming in as a new board member has definitely been at first knowing the parameters, and because you want to be able to use your voice and you want to be able to do the advocacy that you came in to do. But that advocacy has parameters. So that was definitely something that took some getting used to. And with adding to what are some of the challenges in serving as a school board member for the Roseland School District specifically, spend a time a lot of transition with our superintendent. We had an interim and then a new superintendent, so it's definitely been something where being aboard and hearing different perspectives and concerns, but then you're the person that's directly working with the superintendent. So the balance between what you're seeing and what you know versus what you're hearing, what the public might not necessarily know, that navigating that fine line there. And I think that the day when people come to board meetings, they tend to come because they want to be heard and they want to be validated. That doesn't necessarily mean that you might agree or that they know the full story. But for me, what I've seen is that as a board, the importance of providing that validation, because people are coming to you seeking feedback.
Question in the back.
What's the time commitment of being on a school board in general? I mean, obviously there's scheduled meetings, but beyond that, I mean, are there other things that we need to be aware of? And just making, making ourselves aware of that. I mean, I have 2 jobs and 2 kids and, stuff. So I'm just trying to think
What
about
district are you running for?
WA.
I think WA is about the same size as Alexander Valley. I mean, that'd be a more accurate time commitment. Oh, it's bigger.
So, I think, first of all, at least in our district, each board member is required to sit on 1 or 2 committees. So curriculum committee, a safety committee, that sort of thing. So that would be, depending on the committee, probably, maybe 1 meeting a month, maybe 4 a year, depending on the type of that particular committee. Over and above that, our board packets probably run somewhere between 50 and 300 pages, and you're expected to read those and know pretty much what's in there. So that's your largest commitment, and those are usually, at least in our district, we ask that they get sent out the Thursday before our Monday night board meeting, so you have 1 weekend to read them. You have like 1 weekday or 2 weekdays and then a weekend, because that does take quite a bit of time. But that's your, and then of course your board meeting. So, it's not a huge commitment, but it's there. I mean, it's several hours a month.
Yeah, and then also sometimes, depending on your district, if you have an active parent group or an active foundation or somebody that wants you to come and check out the amazing work that they're doing or their events, their sport and their games. So that's an added responsibility. It's not like you have to do that, but it just really, that's a great experience for any board member because it gives you the opportunity to talk to other parents, especially if you're not familiar with the basketball team, you get to meet a whole new group of people. And then that's really valuable information to bring back to your board meetings, different perspectives, I would say too. We do also have to serve on 2 different committees now that you mentioned that. And also there's something that so one of the other questions, not every district has a budget line item for professional development for their board members. But if your district does do that, I would highly encourage, and even if they don't and you have extra money, I would highly encourage you to attend California, you've heard CSBA, California School Board Association Conference, the California Latino School Board Association Conference, the Unity Conference they do every October and August. Then there's, we have the county CCBE, which is the California County Board of Education Conference, which is mostly for tailored to county board members. Then you have the National School Board. Any conference that you can go to, it's amazing because you are listening to what people are doing up and down the state or the whole nation. You bring back these ideas and you share with your team, your superintendent, and it's a great way to bring back valuable resources and ideas to your district.
I was just sharing that, the Latino one, and there's also an AAPI community, and I think there's a Black community one that have workshops. So there's not just conferences, but they have specific workshops about how to serve these specific student populations in the schools.
And there's also local coalitions or organizations that are focused on education that may not be rooted in your district, but it's like a countywide opportunity. And those are just all experiences for learning. Any other questions?
I would tell you some of the things that you talked about challenges. I think personnel decisions are the hardest ones to do for school boards, because you need to know that about 94% of the budget is personnel driven. Very little is spent other outside of people. School business is a person, it's a people business. And so when you can't get your budget to balance, it means by March 15th, you have to give preliminary notices. And that's the first, that's just, we can't see where we're gonna make these cuts. And she was talking about her 27 years, you've been down this road before. And then you have the pressure groups, oh, well, Mr. So-and-so, because he's lowest on the list, or all these things. But your job is to keep the budget of the district solvent. So it's not personal. That's the hardest decision I have always had to face as a superintendent. When I did layoffs, I met with every individual I ever had to lay off, because I think they need to know it's not important. It's not about you. You're a good teacher. You're a good person. It's a matter of position and cost. And if I could bring you back, I will. And this is how we're going to do it. It's that's the personal part of being a superintendent that I think is most difficult one I've ever had, is having to do cuts. And I was a superintendent of a small rural district, and that really hurts because it's all family. So I look at Alexander Valley, and it's all family out there. They've been there for years, and you have to do a cut. So I would say personnel decisions are the hardest, and you can't share personnel information. It's private. So I think that's something to keep in mind. I was going to say, does Petaluma have two school meetings a month? And Windsor had two.
We have 2 a month, and then
You have committee
July, November, and December will be one.
So look at, every school board has a 9,000 series, policy series. You have to adopt your policies. Look at the 9,000, that's board bylaws. And it sort of outlines what your district bylaws are. So you might want to look at those to see what your district, how it's set up. You have committees, they have committees. Each district each board has set up the operational practices of the district. So look at your district's policies as it relates to operation.
One other question, have you found that you've been able to have the impact that you hoped that you would have when you decided to join a school board, or do you find that, you know, it's a lot more nuts and bolts and kind of just getting the things done?
This is a great question.
It just depends on the day. Some days I'm like, yeah, that's so great. Like, we got that through, and other days I'm like, why is it taking so long? It just, things in schools take a long time, and something that Yvonne was talking about, you might go in, join a board with like some really great ideas, but then you may have to bring other people along. And as someone was saying, you can't like do that behind closed doors. Everything has to be open and out in the public. So it's like finding the right time during the meeting to talk about what you would like to do and move forward. But to answer your question, yes and no. Like, there's some great things happening, I think, in Petaluma, but there's more that I feel like I would like to see. So, but you know, after 3.5 years, we're taking steps. So.
Another excellent resource too that I forgot to mention earlier is if you are elected, there are new school board member workshops, and SCO hosts a couple of them for all the new elected candidates or school board members, but also the veteran ones who are re-elected and just want to brush up on some of that exciting Brown Act information in their ed code. And there are Brown Act books if you really are serious and want to read it beforehand, but honestly, most districts do have legal counsel, and superintendents are pretty familiar with the Brown Act. And like Rocio said, I definitely leaned on Dr. Herrington when I first started with the school board, and they pretty much equipped you with all that information. And he has grown a little shorter since we've met. But anyways, are there any other questions from our guests, but also from the panel? Is there any words of wisdom you would want to share with the community here who is interested in running?
Touch again on something that Dr. Herrington mentioned about budgets and then about personnel. And so we're going to start to see those two things more closely collide and be more contentious, because even though we have a great budget from the governor, 6% COLA and more money invested in schools, with inflation like 8-9%, like there were things that we wanted to do. Like building materials were too expensive, so we had to table things. It's really hard to hire people. And our whole school board went to a national lobbying session and just asking from the federal government, give us more time to spend this money because we want to hire people. This money gave us, we don't have time to spend it because we can't find people. It's just this whole hamster wheel, it feels like. And so those will probably be your biggest challenges if you join the board. Making personnel decisions, unfortunately, that's going to be cuts, and trying to pay a livable wage as well in this economy.
I'm going to give you a question. Do you know how your district's financed? Is it state finance or is it property tax finance? Each board member should know that. That's one of the most basic questions you need to know. So if you're a state finance public school system, which is LCFF, local control funding formula, you hear them talk about that. That means that you have to live from the state. The state pays you a per amount per student. That's the state minimum average. Now, if you are a community funded school district, such as Alexander Valley, they live off their property tax. That means their student population and their property tax exceeds the amount that the state gives. So that extra dollar, they get to put into their school system. Half of our community schools are basic funded school district. I almost use the old word basic aid, but community funded school districts. So you need to know where yours is. You're going to run for the school board. Where does the money come from? That's one of the first questions you should ask. Ask the superintendent. He or she should know.
So when did the verbiage, I've only heard basic aid. And
That's-
when did that change?
2013, we're just slow changing our vocabulary. Yes.
Give for each student.
It runs the basic, remember, it all goes back to Prop 13, what your basic property tax was when they converted over to Prop 13. So if you had district had a low base, it was built from there. So on the average, if you are a basic aid school district from the state of California, it's about $14,000. It's probably going to be closer to $16,000 per child with federal dollars coming in. Okay, so it depends how much federal money you get. For example, some districts, because they have economic impact in their community, meaning they have high lunch counts, they have economic interest, they're not making them, the income level is easier there. They'll get more federal dollars than a district such as Alexander Valley that will get very few. I don't even think you get any entitlement. Yeah. Because the community makes more than the average. So you have to learn that. You have to learn how your community is funded, because that's going to determine where you move your money and where you put your priorities. Remember, the school board handles the money as directed. The superintendent will make a proposal, but you have that authority to change that. That's a little different than our situation. They approve the budget, but county superintendent's the elected authority who can design the budget. And so it's really good that we're on talking terms.
And we have the same haircut.
Yeah.
Another thing too is all your districts do have the local control accountability plan, which coincides with your budget. And that's it's very long. It's about 100, ours is 130 pages, but every district has one, and that might help you with your kind of creating your campaign message, understanding what the school is focusing on in terms of equity, because equity is not equal. It means that the students who need the most resources are getting more resources than the students who are getting proper resources. And that's very important to understand. And as we all know in this room, since we're looking at the student populations in Sonoma County, it has been heavily shifted towards our Latinx, Latino, Hispanic community. And a very important population that I would encourage all of you, but I'm just recommending, I'm not saying you have to do this. But you need to include your Latino and Spanish speaking family members in part of your campaign because they're your students and their families are living in your community. And I think that's a very common, and it's more and more engaged, they've been getting more and more engaged, but it's something that we commonly forget about because they're not showing up the way that other parents who are coming from affluent communities or speak fluent English show up to the school board meetings. You're going to see very little amounts of parents who are Latino or Spanish speaking at public comment, and there's issues and challenges in that district. I highly encourage you to find out why that is and what's the engagement plan of your school district. And I know that's not where we're trying to today with this forum, but it is, our Latino community is over 50% of the K through 12 population, and that's just going to continue to increase.
I would tell you 3 things to wrap up tonight is that you need to get from your district. Budget, the local control, funding, the plan, the LCAP plan, local accountability plan, and the 9,000 series on the district and how it practices its business. You do those 3 things and pull those documents. Let the school board, let the administrative assistant know that you're planning to run for the school board and you'd like a copy of those items. Those are all public information items. Most 9,000 policies are online. They'll probably tell you that, so you can scan it at home and just look through them. It tells you the officers of the meeting and so on. So, but as Herman said, the local control accountability plan is where the district has put its priorities. They have to do that for the state to show them where they're spending the money. So, any last minute questions? Trying to honor time here. First of all, I want to thank our panelists. You did a nice job.
I did. It was going back to actually what you said about the community that you serve, and I know you guys all started as community members. And how do you keep a beat on what's going on within your school community once you become a school board member? Does it change? Does it? You just keep going about business?
From my personal experience, when I first joined the Alexander Valley Board, I was a parent. And when I got on the board, nobody talked to me. It was a very interesting experience because, I mean, everybody had been voicing complaints and talking about, you know, this teacher and that program and whatnot. And you get on the board and it was crickets, you know? So you have to reach out to people, but you have to be kind of careful how you do it too, you know, because you have to be careful not to be saying things you shouldn't say and all that. But yes, there is a definite change, or at least in my situation, it definitely was. Thank you.
Well, and I guess this is, it kind of goes back to the question Herman had asked about overall advice. I think that while it's intimidating at first to be such a new board member, I think that for those of you who are running for the first time, something that's very valuable is that you're bringing in a very fresh perspective. And once you've been on the board for quite some time, it's easier to not not ask those questions or just assume that this is the way things should be done. And so for me, I think that asking those questions, and one of the biggest questions that I have found useful in asking of myself, but also fellow board members, is whose voice is missing here. I think that the best way to go about involving community is not just doing it one-on-one, but how can the whole board listen to a voice that might be missing? Because then it's public. And then you can talk about those things, and you can, sometimes there's an elephant in the room and it needs to be pointed out in order to move forward as a whole. And it's uncomfortable, but being the the fresh perspective that you can see things and don't ever assume that something has already been talked about or something has already been asked. Do it, and that's how you'll know if it has or hasn't been considered.
I just think, if you choose run for school board and then are elected, to get a really thick skin really quickly. You have to be able to hold boundaries with people. Like I have people, like Facebook message me or text me, and I'm like, hey, can you send this to my Petaluma City Schools email address? Like everything has to go there. And then, I mean, there's like memes I want to repost on Facebook, but I can't. Or, you know, like I can't comment on things like I would have before, so you just have to just learn how to scroll as well. Yeah. It will change your interactions, but not necessarily for the worst.
I had a quick question about interaction. Is there anything that's like taboo for board members to do, like sitting in on a PTO meeting? Is that not something that should be done by a board member to kind of be engaged with the community and see what they're looking at and what they're going over?
Could you repeat the question?
The question
I
was-
didn't hear them all.
Okay, the question was, what's appropriate to be engaged with? I heard the question, like, can you attend a PTA meeting? Is it all right as a PTA member? Can you make comment on the PTA budget or things like that? You just have to be careful when you make comment on the PTA budget that you're not speaking as a board member. You have to always, I would always make myself people known, you know, because my children went to every one of my districts I was superintendent. And I always, your wife said, well, yes, my wife has her opinions, and I honor, you know, I respect those, but you have to balance that. Because you are a board member when you sit as a board, but you don't give up your parental rights. You still get to participate. You should participate in your child's school. So I would just, it's a matter of, like she said, it's a matter of balance. And when someone wants to talk to you about, you know, Herman, the teacher that your son has, you know, I really don't, that's not appropriate. That's what my wife would always say, that it's not appropriate. That's for me to talk about those things. So you have to learn the polite answers and the correct answers to give, because you have to respect people and the confidentiality that goes with some of the part of your job as personnel. So it's a, she said, right, it's a tightrope, you have to walk with very carefully. Yes, George.
If you're a coach at a middle school or a high school, and you get elected to the school board, do you have to give up your?
You should. You should, because are you getting paid?
What if you don't accept the pay?
It doesn't make any difference. If it's a paid position and you're filling it, you have a conflict of interest.
What if it's a volunteer position?
That's a little different. You can still keep your volunteer if you're a walk-on, and just helping out with the football coach. That's different. But you have to be careful, once again, what you say. And you voted for the football budget, but you didn't vote for the increase in the fine arts budget.
Can you abstain from like the football budget and athletics?
Yeah, it's a personal choice. Remember, abstention is where you have a personal conflict of financial gain or interest. So I tell board members, you really can't abstain very much, because what's the personal gain of interest to you? That's what an abstention is. So, but if he's approving something, if his son's the quarterback and it's going to be beneficial to him, I would abstain. Family, you have to watch about nepotism and all that other stuff. Look at your board bylaws. All that's defined in the board bylaw. Questions? I want to thank you all for coming. I wish you the best of luck should you choose to run. It's going to be odd not to run again, but it's also a sort of relief. So I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
So I think I started
We collected writing. They have a
We did exactly the same.
Oh, I have no idea.
Oh, the big district.
Yeah.
So rather than have to contact them, at least based on the side, either 5%. Most of our districts are small.
And like, so I just. And I was like, oh,
So you get appointed and then.
no, I don't know.
My own, like, unusual needle was gone.
Which I personally didn't, I just went in and I said, look, I'm fine if I don't get it. But hopefully it's- That's my case.
Ours was the other county.
Basic. Yeah, so I don't know, it's like,
Twice a year.
Yeah, I think it's like.
Smash flush.
Oh, I understand that.
And that's- and they also- I have-
Anyway, I'll probably.
I think myself, it's maybe like
That's
100%.
interesting, that's right.
That's
Like,
my
you're
return.
like, how's that, right? And so like, that's what I was like.
And I said,
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, nice to hear all the.
That would be the best.
It's all- Yeah.
It was really good to meet you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.